Today we have the Commemoration of Pope St. Gregory the Great from the years 540 to 604. Doctor of the Church, considered the first medieval pope, and a towering figure in the formation of Western Europe. He really can be considered, Gregory the Great, that period of time, and especially Gregory the Great himself, can be considered the link between the ancient and the medieval period. We kind of take for granted history, but at some point history was the present, and it didn't have to turn out the way that it did, and Pope Gregory the Great was absolutely instrumental in that. His background is that his father was a patrician, one of the leading families of Rome with ancient lineage, and he was a senator and for a time Prefect of Rome. That was like second, under the emperor himself, was the Prefect of Rome. That was St. Gregory the Great's father. So he had an excellent education. He had an early introduction into politics, and by the time he was 30 years old, he himself was the Prefect of Rome. So a very promising political career, and he'd had that excellent education: grammar, rhetoric, the sciences, literature, law, and in every subject he excelled. So he had this excellent and very wealthy and influential upbringing, but at the same time, he also saw kind of the other side of things as well. When he was younger, he had lived through the plague of Justinian, which was just the Black Death, which was hitting the area, and that killed large parts of the Roman population. And that's something that even the wealthy were affected. Money can't save you from certain things. He also, had to, there was a barbarian invasion in the year 546 by the Ostrogoths, and Rome couldn't defend against it, and they had to flee. So his family's wealth spared him the worst horrors of such events, but he saw what could happen, and he saw that other people were not so fortunate, and so that had an impression on him. Eventually, and he was, a Christian, a Catholic, as was his family, so that had an impact on him as well. And it seems that he was really, by the time he was Prefect of Rome and in that highest of political positions, it seems there was a little bit of a little reason he was doing it was just to please his father, or at least out of respect for his father, because when his father died, Gregory quit politics entirely. He just renounced that career completely, went back to his family's villa, and turned it into a monastery, essentially. Lived there as a monk in prayer and penance. But as typical, when God gives somebody great talents, he expects a return on his investment. And so having given to Gregory the Great wealth, advantage, intelligence, great abilities, God wanted him to use those. So even in his villa, even when he tried to live just as a simple monk, other people came to him, others who wanted to imitate his way of life. And he couldn't turn them away, so he ended up, his family's villa ended up becoming a monastery, and he who just wanted to be left alone ended up becoming an abbot by default. Now, at this time, it's interesting. Maybe you've heard of the term the Gregorian Mass, and that is 30 Masses in a row said for a deceased person. And this is kind of an example of how God can bring good out of evil, and how even the saints have excesses that they need to work on. So as Gregory, as kind of this quasi-abbot, has a number of monks with him. Well, a monk was dying, and he confessed on his deathbed that he had stolen some amount of money from I don't know, if some Gregory or somebody. But he confessed he'd stolen this gold from someone, and as Gregory, as a punishment for the monk, forgave him his sins, but ordered that he die alone, and afterwards his corpse be thrown on a dung heap along with the money that he had stolen. "Take your money with you to perdition," said Gregory. So, a little bit rough. So afterwards, he was thinking about it, and Gregory repented for this harshness, and he had 30 Masses in a row said for the repose of this monk's soul. So that's where it comes from. A great mercy for the departed in response to an overzealous harshness towards the departed. Well, so that was when he was kind of, like I said, a kind of a quasi-abbot, but eventually he was appointed I think it was the Archdeacon of Rome, which was in charge they were the distributors of the church goods to the poor. So all the deacons are in charge of distributing it to the poor, the needy, those who actually are in need. And so Gregory was appointed as over them all. And he was given a great charge and much revenue, and he excelled in this office as he did in almost every office. And he greatly endeared himself to the populace due to his excellent care of those who were in need. He was also chosen as a diplomatic legate to the Byzantine Church, in which he also excelled. And all of this was before he was a priest. After all of that, he was ordained a priest and continued his high-level services. He was chosen as papal ambassador in the year 579. So he's I think not even 40 years old, or just about. And 11 years later, in 590, he himself was elected Pope Gregory I. And as I kind of mentioned, his experiences in life were perfect for it. He had that excellent education as a young child, afforded by being in a wealthy family, seen his share of hardships, Rome going through the plague. He'd been sacked by barbarians. He'd been a high-level government official. He knew how to administer and to handle funds, and he had political connections. But he'd also lived life as a lowly monk in a monastery, and he lived in community with other men. He served for a time as a deacon, then he served time as a priest, and so on. It seemed like he'd been through all these different walks of life and was perfectly suited to lead everybody. And not only that, but to kind of pull everybody together and use them together as a system. Because when you've been in all these positions, you know it from that perspective. And then when you're on top of everything, you see how it all works, and you can fit everything together and bring everybody together in a great leadership capacity. That was actually my major at the Naval Academy, was systems engineering, and you pick a little bit of each system and you bring it together and you make something incredible. I can see clearly that is exactly what Pope Gregory did. Because when he became Pope, the papacy and really Rome was in a state of ruins. This is after 476, the collapse of the Roman Empire, and there was various sackings back and forth. 546 by the Goths there. And it was the papacy. We think of it as the Pope as the head of the church. That was not the case early in Gregory's time. I mean, maybe in some capacity, but the power in the church was in Constantinople. It was the Patriarch of Constantinople who had the power. And when the Romans, when Rome wanted to elect a bishop or a pope, they had to request, and the Patriarch of Constantinople and the Emperor had to agree on who the next pope was going to be. So there's all this you would say, we would call that now interference. So the Pope was not this great powerful figure in the church. He was not that at all. It was Gregory who was the first one who began to exert or to show that the Pope can have extreme influence and great power. It was Gregory who started that trajectory. So let's see. Lombards were occupying a large part of Italy, and their attacks had brought the economy to a standstill. Barbarians were camping at the gates of Rome. The city was crowded with refugees living in the streets. As I mentioned, the seat of the government was Constantinople, and so what was he to do? Right, the place was in shambles. Well, one of the things that he did that would bring Rome out of it and kind of revitalize the people was using his connections as the former prefect of Rome, and as I said, bringing everybody together. He started to establish a system of donations, of people who were charitably giving, and he used it to build a system of caring for the poor and of growing crops. He would have very remote areas that were far away from any disturbances. He would have them be producing great amounts of food, and then through logistics, accounting, distribution, and oversight, he would bring all that food into Rome. He would give it to like an army of deacons. They would go out and find the people that really needed it and give it to them. And meanwhile, like everything is working together in that system, as I mentioned earlier. So he did that for Rome, and people saw that. People saw his ability, and not just when there is a great catastrophe catastrophe and a disaster, and people are in desperate need, not everybody is in need. Some people, they just want to keep doing what they're good at, growing crops or delivering things or fixing, carts and wagons and so on. And so when you have somebody who's able to keep everybody occupied, in this endeavor, the whole system, the economy, it boosts, right? It stayed up. And that's what Gregory was able to do, and everybody saw that. In fact, they said upon his death, he had done more for Rome than any of previous emperors, in terms of caring for the poor and bringing it through a time of disaster. And the amazing thing is, this was all possible because people did this for free. The deacons in the church and the priests and people were going out and they were working for free. Those other patriarchs of Rome, not patriarchs, but the patricians of Rome, Gregory had been one of them. He'd been one of them. He was wealthy, he was powerful, and he gave it away. He gave everything away. He'd been prefect of Rome, and now he was just caring for the people. And that inspired them to give of what they had. Rather than hoarding it, they gave it, and that benefited everybody, including those people. And that was just the one side of it. That's just the political side of it. Another great achievement of his was the conversion of barbarians. First of all, the conversion of the barbarian tribes away from the heresy of Arianism, the Franks, the Lombards, and the Visigoths. He was responsible for evangelizing them and bringing them out of that heresy. He also sent the first missionaries to England, which for a time became a source of missionaries to other countries. There's a story of Gregory the Great before he was Pope in the marketplace, and he saw these fair-haired Angles, right, from England. And when he was asked who they were, he was told they were Angles. He replied in Latin, non angli sed angeli, not Angles, but angels. And he resolved then and there he wanted to go and convert England. He himself was going to go, but instead he sent Augustine of Canterbury. And he became known as the Apostle, or the Apostle to England. And then, so Augustine of Canterbury, because of Gregory, converted England, and then England began sending missionaries to Germany, to France, to all these other places, and Europe greatly benefited from that. Gregory regained papal authority in Spain and in France, asserted authority independent of the Patriarch of Constantinople, and throughout the Middle Ages, he was known as the father of Christian worship because of his exceptional efforts in revising the Roman liturgy, especially the Chant, which to this day still bears his name. Gregorian Chant comes from St. Gregory and what he did with that music. He also gave definite shape and form to what we now know as the traditional Latin Mass. There were many variants and many differences, and he standardized them and gave it a definite form. He accomplished all of this. All of his work as Pope was only 14 years. And this is when, this is in the 500s, the early 600s, and logistics and communication are not what we have now, and yet he accomplished all of this, right, in that short span of time. Immediately after his death, Gregory was canonized by popular acclaim. So this is, not all of us, of course. I mean, this is a very rare circumstance when you have a saint like this, but God does raise and call up saints when the church needs it. But it requires cooperation. It requires people to kind of reconcile opposites. And that's what Gregory was. Gregory was kind of an opposite. He had what usually causes a lot of selfishness in people: power, ability, influence, intelligence, connections, money, wealth. He had all those things. And it wasn't just that he used it well or he didn't allow himself to be corrupted. He combined opposites of humility, poverty, obscurity, anonymity. He went to live as a monk. He was going to be all alone and live by himself and be unknown, and that was going to be it. God had other plans. But he was able to combine those two things, like the humility and simplicity of an unlearned peasant with the power and ability and intelligence and connections of a wealthy aristocrat. He brought those together. And then he was able to do these incredible things. But for all of us, that's what it's going to be. That's what's going to enable us to do great things in our lives, is reconciling opposites, right? All of us have something that we're really good at, but that comes with a price, right? People who have great beauty of body or whatever, the price is vanity. And you have to reconcile that opposite. You have to be able to give that away and pretend as if, you didn't have it, or run from it, as Gregory showed. If you've got intelligence, you have to be okay with being thought of as a fool, or even settling for simple things. I might go on, right? Those who are very very bold and adventurous, you've got to be content with kind of like the mundane and the boring and the everyday. Those who want to be left alone in peace and quiet, you have to be willing to go forth and do great things. That is, I would say, the lesson that we're taught, and you can see that in the lives of so many saints. What they were good at and what they wanted to do, and they want to be left alone. God asked them something else, so we could combine something with them. Anyways, I would say that's what it is. So whatever it is that you are good at, examine yourself for how that may not be a benefit, and you kind of like your worst fear, what you don't want God to ask you to do, right? Think about how you can grow in that direction, right? He might be asking you something after all, that might be hiding from it. In any case, let us continue on. That's what Lent is about, is reconciling opposites. We're hungry, we desire food, forego food. We desire comfort, forego comforts. Get used to hardship. We don't like doing difficult things. Make yourself do not only difficult things, but something extra. That's how it works, a discipline. Pray for that grace, continue your Lenten penances, and let us ask for the intercession of St. Gregory the Great. May God bless you all in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.